Okay. So again, I'm Angie Furubotten-LaRosee, and I'm a certified financial planner. I started this firm of a financial planning just last year, so this is really my first year in business. And you know, much like you, I've got high school students as well. We were talking earlier a little bit about that. So that's really what got me interested in knowing more about the whole going to college, paying for college. You know, I have this financial background. I've studied a lot and worked a lot in the field, but was never exposed to any of that kind of content. So I sought out that extra education over the last couple of years. And now I'm part of a group of advisors throughout the country who are all kind of learning this stuff all together, because it has been a bit of a weakness. And as you all know, I would say that we have some level of a student loan crisis going on in our country, and it does not seem to be going away anytime soon. So in an effort to not fall into any traps that I'm not familiar with and not aware of, you know, I wanted to educate myself, and then I knew it would be of value to any of my clients as well. You know, even older, you know, grandparents who have grandchildren that might be coming up. It's got value for them as well as the parents of college-bound students. So I kind of like to get an idea. Is this your first student to go through the college process? Is that yes for everybody? Okay. And then also, I was just kind of curious, what schools are your students in? Delta. Delta. Okay, come on again. Yay. Are you a Delta student?
Yes.
Okay. Yay, absolutely. Good for you. And then oldest student is in what year of school?
Junior.
Junior and ninth. Okay. Okay, and what would you say is your biggest concern? We have some options here, you know, the testing, admissions, the career or major selection, the financial aid process, or paying out-of-pocket expenses or something else. The tests? SATs?
The rest of the stuff, I think that's minor stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's the hardest stuff, because that's more or less your entry more than.
So just getting into college by having a high enough SAT is important to you, okay? How about you guys?
Mine's all of it. So this morning I tried to register my son for the SATs, and that, I don't know, there was a lot on that website. It was not easy to do it at all.
Okay.
Yeah, it's complicated with lots of little stuff. I swear it makes it more difficult to get the child in than.
Yeah, we just like signed up and showed up at school and took the test.
Yeah.
No, that's not what the website said.
Okay. Well, I'll just share with you, there is another business here in the Tri-Cities called Sage College Prep Services, and they do SAT and ACT test prep as well.
No,
for
just
kids.
to sign them up.
Just to sign them up, sure, yeah. But if you're worried about the actual numbers that you're going to get, you know, once you've done your pre-testing and want to improve on those, then if you're looking at tutoring, we do have a local business that does that as well. Okay. All right, so I did housekeeping, and that's just kind of getting to know you guys a little bit. So this is go back in time, right? This is a dream. So this is a family perhaps much like yours. This happens to be my family. Yeah, recognize any of those?
I know both of them.
And you know, as moms, as parents, we can't even imagine where did that time go, right? It was just like overnight. So that time for planning for college may have come and gone already. So here we are. We're staring at the tuition in the face, I like to say. And you know, we are feeling it just like you guys. So again, I kind of go back to was one of the things that motivated me to learn more, was because we are right there with you. And to me, you know, the problem is this, you know, trying to help our young, naive, inexperienced students who want to go to college and get an education to not walk out with a 5-figure student loan debt, right? That's kind of our nemesis right there. Okay, so interestingly, my husband sent me an email, and it was a Rolling Stones article about a guy, happened to be this guy, Scott Naylor, and he had been featured in an article because he is a teacher over more on the East Coast, I believe, and the article started by describing how he really intended to take his own life because he was under the burden of such high amounts of debt, and he really felt like his family was better off with him dead. And what a tragic way to think, and all due to these student debt that he had accumulated over time. And so I got the opportunity to interview him for my podcast, and he's episode 10 and 11. So if you ever get a chance to listen, he will tell his story, and it's quite fascinating, really. And it's a cautionary tale. It really is. We don't want our students to end up like Scott. And Scott did some things wrong. He did some things right, but it's really just that not knowing how to go through this process that really hurt him in the long term. Okay, and then just a shameless plug, that's my podcast. It's on my website and iTunes and Stitcher and all those places too. We've got a wide variety of different topics that we interview. Okay, so because I am a comprehensive financial planner, I really don't see the college planning piece in a bubble. I see it all tied in together with retirement in particular, your investments, other parts of your financial life. It's just that for us who have 18-year-olds or high school students, it's staring us in the face. So it's really right here, right now. And so just real quick about me, again, I just opened my business last year, and I do the comprehensive planning and money management as well, but I have the special emphasis on the college funding piece. That's a definite specialty I have gotten into over the last couple of years. I also am quite strong in Social Security, which are kind of two ends of the spectrum. But they both have some commonalities because they both have a lot of complexity to them, and there's a lot you can do wrong in addition to doing right. So I just find them both very interesting, and those are some areas that I include in the work that I do. So I like to talk about, what is my mission? My mission is multifold, really. It's just trying to get families to start thinking and planning, and I really feel that there's power in planning. Power in planning. I want to empower families to make informed college choices, right? To go in knowing something, to save on the cost of college, not just for college, because maybe those days are behind you already. To help families be proactive instead of reactive. You hear the stories of people who come out of college with burdensome amount of student debt, and maybe if we had looked at that in the early years instead of after the fact, that would have turned out better. Remove the emotion. Boy, have any of you been on a college campus in the last year or two to visit? How exciting is that? And how wow, I want to go here. It's really, and they're doing a really good job at getting us all very excited to attend their university. Whether or not it fits with your budget, we don't know. But that excitement, that emotion is really palpable, especially when you visit. And so kind of taking that emotion away, and I'll illustrate what I mean by doing it a little bit differently. We want our students to graduate on time with low or no student loan debt, right? And then, of course, all of this without robbing mom and dad's retirement. We don't want to derail their goals in their life as well. So those are some of the things that are really important in trying to accomplish. So we all know, college costs are going up. We had a weird little anomaly a couple of years ago in Washington where tuition went down, but that was kind of odd, and I don't know that will happen again. Some projected growth rates here in Washington, as well as some projected just public and private growth rates as well, year by year. Okay, just expectations, nothing for sure, but this is kind of fun. I've actually got this site open I'll jump over here real quick. It's a debt clock. And so it's ticking, right? Student loans is more than auto and credit card combined. I didn't know that. That's a big number. It's over 1.6 trillion, depending which clock you look at. Regardless, it's a lot. It's a lot. And so this is the problem. This is one of the problems, the student loan debt. We've all read articles and seen the things on the news about people not being able to repay. We've got a furlough going on right now. What do you think that's doing to families trying to repay student debt? The numbers just are not improving. And so I'm here to kind of argue that the way that we shop for college is all wrong. And I'll show you why. Okay. I like to sort of equate buying a college education to buying a house. So what would you do if you were to go buy a house? You kind of get an idea of what you're looking for, maybe the area that you want to live in, what types of houses, and maybe have some ballpark idea of the cost. But then your next real step is to typically go to the bank or credit union and get a pre-approval, right? And what do they want to know? They want to know things like, what's your income? What kind of assets do you have? How good of a job do you have? How long have you been working at that job? They want to know a lot about you. And I would say even more now than 10 years ago, before the credit crisis. Okay, so if I had gone to my bank and said, hey, you know, I'd really like to buy this house. Anybody know what house this is? It's Bill Gates' house. Okay, so if I walked in and said, you know, I'd like to buy Bill Gates' house, what do you think they're going to say after they ask me my income and assets and so on? They're going to say denied, because I don't have the ability to repay a $130 million loan, is what it would cost to buy Bill's house. Okay, so, you know, the same situation kind of applies to college. Here we've got this $100,000, maybe $200,000 sticker price on this college education that somebody somewhere says, sure, we'll lend you all of it, especially you, parent. We'll lend you all of it. And so we as consumers cannot let them lend that to us. We have to be in charge of the whole process and know what is affordable. And this is what I'm trying to kind of share. Okay, so I call it a better way to shop for college. And it starts with these very simple 3 steps. The first step is to figure out what do you have available to spend on college. And I'll move off of here to my software, because in the course of the last 2 years, we've gone from paper kind of products to helping figure this out, just Excel spreadsheets, for example. And now my cohort, they have developed a software to help us do it all over the internet. So you take all your resources, and when I say resources, I mean everything from those savings accounts, those 529 accounts. You might have retirement accounts. Maybe you didn't earmark those for college, but they still might come into play. Cash flow just from your job, or cash flow from your student's job. So we're looking at any source of savings or income. Then we add those all up. We kind of come up with a number. Our next step is to then, based on that amount, is to figure out what our maximum student debt might be okay at, what level that it would be okay at. And we have a rule of thumb that says that, okay, if I'm going to be an engineer, I need to do some research to figure out what do engineers make that first year out of school about. What do they make about? If I'm going to live in Tri-Cities, what do they make? If I'm going to live in Seattle, what do they make? And that's really the guideline by which you don't want to go above for borrowing. Because if you're going to come out of school as an engineer and you might make $60,000 a year, you don't want to borrow any more than $60,000. It becomes too expensive for your lifestyle once you are off in the working world. And we'll talk about that as well. And then the last step is, now you've kind of got this budget, I would call it. It's basically a budget and a maximum student loan amount that you've figured out. Now we say go shop for schools. And this is also not really easy because schools have different prices. They have kind of that big sticker price that we talk about, but then there's all these possibilities as far as scholarships or merit aid or need aid, that come off that sticker price. So we have to do some research and figure out the cost of going to school, the net cost. Okay. So here again is sort of that, this is where I got this research. This is from naceweb.org, and it gives you an idea of salaries. Okay, so we just know that some salaries are higher than others right out of the gate. After tonight too, most of these tools I've put into a PDF along with this. It's called Having the College Money Talk with Your Child, and I will go ahead and email that to everybody as well. Because this is the important thing as well, is to start talking with your student. Set those expectations. If you've been talking all along that grandma and grandpa are going to pay for college and you, the student, don't have to participate at all, make sure that that's really been formalized, that we talk about it one more time, before we start applying to school. Bring grandma and grandpa in, bring the student in. Or if grandma and grandpa aren't in the picture and really student is going to be on the hook for a lot more, that's something they need to know as early as possible, right? We all need to kind of know where we stand. So that's having the college talk. Okay, so here is sort of the beginning of the resources that I have available. This is the paper version, the Excel version, but we also have a software tool that we've converted all of this to. So like I mentioned, you've got things like the parent resources, savings accounts, and cash flow from their job. And maybe other stuff, whatever other stuff might end up being. If you want to sell that car that's been in your property for the last 10 years and it might get you 10 grand. So anything there. Parent loans, we like to just start with a zero because we just start with zeros in all the loan areas. Student resources, now we're looking at any of their savings. As your student is starting to work, they should be saving some portion. Again, that kind of goes back to having that money talk. And then not only the savings from the student, but maybe what from their cash flow. So we have 4 years of college, we have maybe a couple in high school. All that time, are you going to be putting $100 a month or $200 a month? And that's going to go directly to paying for college and so on. And then we can kind of look and see what the gap is looking like. Where do those student loans come in? Where do private loans come in? Or where do parent loans come in? Because they all have a line item. We just kind of like to start with zero before we go putting those in. You add all these up and they kind of carry over to here. And for this particular example, the pre-approval amount adds up to $91,000. And this is a 4-year number. So really, that is kind of your starting budget for the full 4 years for your student. And so if you're now looking to, you're taking that budget and you're starting to look at schools, if you have schools that are $200,000 over the course of those 4 years, you have a gap of over $100,000, and you now have to figure out, how do we pay for that gap? And that's kind of the big question. Do we change our plans, or do we take on debt? How do we pay for that gap? Okay, I think I wanted to jump off onto my calculators here. Okay, so we have this is our web version of that same sheet. It has all the same items, the savings and the cash flow. I don't know that I matched up the numbers here, but it's pretty close. So we have a 4-year pre-approval of about $96,000. Okay, and so that's what that looks like. If I was to go back, I did this all prior. This is like a test family. This test family has information about themselves. They have ages, they have income, they have assets. The student has some bio, and when we talk about bio, we mean like their grades and their SAT or ACTs, and if there's any siblings and how many are in the family, because those all come into play when you're looking at the EFC, which is your expected family contribution, or your consensus or your CSS profile, which are all different ways to calculate what they think your family should be able to pay. Okay, so the federal version is the FAFSA, and that's the FAFSA is the federal EFC, and in this case, with all the numbers that I have put in here, this family has an EFC of 31,000. Okay, and that comes into play when we're looking at the schools. So back to that pre-approval. Okay, so let me so within some of those line items of the pre-approval, there's some details. So the American Opportunity Tax Credit, are you guys familiar with that? No? What that is a credit to families for any child that they have in college, and it's per student per year. So if you had more than one student in college at the same time, you could theoretically get this credit, and it's a tax credit. It reduces your taxes dollar for dollar, right? But what you need to do is you have to spend $4,000 out of pocket. So when I say out of pocket, I mean that you can't take $4,000 from your 529 plan, because the 529 plan is already tax preferred. It has some special tax treatment. So this has to be money that's not in a qualified type of an account. So typically it's just coming out of your bank, you know, your checking or savings account, or your cash flow, you know, just plain old income. Okay, and the way it works is for the first 2,000, you will get 100%, so that's 2,000, and then for the next 2,000, you get 25%. So that's where that $4,000 amount comes from. There is a phase out, you can see here. I think these are current numbers, and these numbers tend to change like some of the tax numbers do year by year a little bit. So keep your eye on those, but for families that are married, if you make between 160 and 180, there's a phase out. You won't get the full $2,500 credit. Okay, so that's what that is.
So the more money you make, the less you get.
Yeah, the less eligible you are for the credit. And there's
Even
other.
as a single parent?
So you would be a single. There's a single numbers as well. So if your income is between 80 and 90, that would apply to you. Future workshops, check my website. I'm doing these things pretty frequently, so we like to have things that people are interested in. Okay, so also falling into that college budget is the lending part of it, right? So we want to make sure we have a smart lending strategy. So on a very basic level, we tend to have the two kinds of loans that are student loans. They are both the Stafford loan, which can be either subsidized or unsubsidized. And you can see the rates here, and again, the rates change year by year, so it's good to keep an eye on those. There's also a fee. I would call it like an origination fee, just like when you buy a house, they take that off the top. But this rate right now is 5.05. And the difference between the subsidized and the unsubsidized is that one is given to students who have a need for the subsidized, and the subsidized means that the interest will not be accruing until repayment. So they get a little break on the interest. And then for graduate, there's also some options as well. Keep in mind, and this is sort of a strategy to understand a lending strategy, is that when you are, this is why we want you to plan out your full 4 years too, is because we don't want you to think that you have all this money that you can spend maybe from your 529 plan, from your savings account in year 1 and year 2, and then you need to borrow for 3 and 4. Because what happens is these numbers, the 5,500, the 6,500, 75, and 75, they are per year. And if you did not take out that $5,500 amount in year 1 when you were a freshman, you are no longer eligible to use that after you've become a sophomore. And so you want to plan out your borrowing. You know, even though we don't want to borrow, hopefully, we got to kind of factor it in and plan out our other resources, our cash flow, our savings, our 529 plans, and spread them out appropriately so that we can both take advantage of the tax credit and take advantage of the student loan that is only available in that year. Okay, so that's the real important part for the 4-year plan. And then there's the Federal Plus loan. That's the parent loan. And look at that rate. It's 7.6, and it has a almost, well, just over 4% fee. So it's close to 11% all in that first time. So I heard something today, something about being some changes in this area, but I don't know if that's coming to fruition or not. Another thing I did hear is that if you're kind of the right kind of client, there are banks or lenders who will refi your Parent Plus loan for a much lower loan, but you got to be kind of the right kind of customer that they're looking for. So, okay, and the trick here, the thing that can really trip up a parent is that they will allow you to borrow the full amount of college as a parent. So, you know, there's your need, and then there's the cost to attend, and if you need to borrow all of it, that's doable, assuming you have good credit and you meet their credit requirements, but they will allow you to borrow that full amount. And that's why, again, I go back to this whole college is not planning in a bubble. It really is connected to retirement, and it's connected to all these other financial and personal goals that you have in your life. It's because if you get your financial aid letter back from the college and it says that everything can be paid for, it's just going to be on the parent loan. So now you have to decide, what do I do? What's important? What's our values? How are we going to figure this out? Okay. Yeah, and I just like to remind that financial aid, you get financial aid, but it doesn't always mean it's a gift. A lot of it comes in the form of a loan that has to be returned. Thank you. Okay, and then of course there's private loans. Won't go too much into those. Those are always something you just need to kind of do your due diligence on. Okay, any questions here at this point? Do we have any questions on the other side? Yes. Okay. See where I'm at. Okay, so we're going to look a little bit at a case study. Again, this is our pre-approval amount. We went through and tallied up our savings and everything, including grandma and grandpa. Grandma and grandpa fall into other help. And another thing about that is you do need to sort of get a firm commitment from what's being planned from grandma and grandpa or aunt and uncle, whoever that is, that outside family member, because there can be some negative impact to the financial aid eligibility if it's done poorly or incorrectly. And so, again, planning is power. The more you can plan ahead to either shift those assets from grandma and grandpa to mom and dad, for example, that would be a possibility that would help that situation. And just the fact that we now have grandma and grandpa kind of committed, maybe in writing, you know, not kind of nebulous. They said something, but we don't know what they're going to do. You know, try to pin them down. That's the time. And so we've got our total resources available over here of about $98,000. Okay, so this student wants to go into education, I guess, and that starting salary is somewhere in the 40s, just roughly. Each state is going to be very different, so you would want to kind of take a look at that. Okay, so I'm going to flip over again to the software. Okay, so we've got a whole variety of colleges here that are just in our selection, and we've put in everything from, this is like a state school here in Washington. This is a private school in Washington. This is a private school outside of Washington. Harvard is a private school outside of Washington. So some are elite, some are state, some are regular private, kind of a variety. We can take a look at, I was going to take a look at Whitman. So the thing that we learn here in this screen is that what kind of a school is it? Actually, I don't see this one showing EFC basis. It would normally say that it's a FAFSA school or it's a CSS school. And I'm thinking Whitman is a CSS profile school, which means the CSS profile goes into deeper dig into your personal financials for the family. It's above and beyond what the FAFSA does. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on too. And it gives you some idea of who attend, the SAT, the grade point, and so on. Gives you some stats there. One more thing. If I scroll down, you start to also get a sense of some of the possible scholarships. So if you happen to be that lucky family with a top student, then if they have some minimum GPAs and minimum test scores, they might qualify for some real money at certain institutions. And this is a way to at least start to explore. You can click on these, and I think it would take you to the website. You would always want to go back to the actual original school website and confirm any of the scholarships that they have available, because things do change. But at least you get a sense that, okay, well, maybe my kid is a 3.4, they've got a pretty good SAT, they might be eligible for that $11,000 scholarship, and that's probably a yearly thing, okay? And then reading more details over here. So that gives us some idea there. We just default to sort of the average non-need merit award of close to $12,000. And then if we look at the how to pay part, I'm going to go back to Whitman. Here's our 4 years of school at Whitman. There's that $11,000 that they said this student might be eligible for because of the merit. Because I don't remember what I put in the bio, if it was a top student or not, but somehow this student qualifies perhaps for some merit money. And then because their EFC, they would be in here, is around $28,000. They would also have some need because the full cost to attend is $65,000. That's per year, right? So Whitman is around $274. And then, if you kind of take away all the scholarship and the need-based grants, it could get down as low as $127. Well, our college pre-approval amount is $96 for this family. So we still have a gap of about $31,000. So how do we plan to pay for that? And is that acceptable as a family, knowing that that's a possibility? And, don't get too hung up on all the tiny numbers, but it's still just to give you a sense for what is possible, that in fact the $274,000 school may not cost you $274,000. There are other schools. Let me take a look at another school. Okay, so same here. We've got it's a private out-of-state school. The total 4-year cost to attend is just over $200,000. This student is eligible for a little bit of a merit scholarship, taking it down by almost $50,000, but now the cost to attend is closer to $150,000. Again, our pre-approval amount is just closer to $100,000. That's $50,000 difference. How do we pay that? What's our plan? And so the other really cool thing about this, I think, is that if we were to borrow that difference, that $56,000, if you look down here, a normal standard 10-year repayment period is 120 payments, and they're using a 6% interest rate, which will change, and rates are going up, so that's likely to go up. That it would cost that student $632 every month for 10 years. That's valuable. That really helps that student understand, what does that even mean when I graduate? How does that fit into my budget after college? And what's the total end up be? You end up, that $56,000 now is $75,000 total after 10 years. Okay, so you can see how, and that's assuming a on-time payment rate, no problems, did not defer, did not have any problems in the middle. So that's kind of that perfect plan. I find that very illuminating because, again, for our inexperienced 18 to 22-year-olds who've never borrowed $100,000 before or $50,000 before, I think this can help them sort of see out into the future. And that's one of the things that I think is our job, is to help them see out into the future. Okay. I'll go back. Okay, so this is sort of the same example. It's just really small, and I'm going to kind of skip through it. Yeah, so at some point you would need to determine, you're the bank, you know, would I qualify for this loan? Do I want to be on the hook for this loan, yes or no, or would I be denied? This is another, just a simple tool that I'll put into that packet that I'll email out to everybody. It's a budget. Again, because unless your student has been really diligent or you've taught them how to do these kinds of things, once they're out of college, they will need to start to understand, I make money, but I spend money, and I have money taken away from me before I even spend my money. Taxes, I have health insurance, I have car payments, I have all these things. And then where does that $600 student loan payment come in? And do I come out ahead at the end of the month, or do I come out behind? And how is that going to impact my ability to save for my retirement, for my future house, for my family? You know, these are things I think is really hard for young people to even fathom at this point. So it all kind of works together. So we're going to look at the college timeline and a little bit in financial aid. I like to remind people that much like any other business, college is a business. They're in the business of finding the best students who will pay the most for college. And they're pretty good at what they do. At least they have been in the past. So it's our job as consumers to do our research, figure out things like, have any of you been exploring on some of the college websites? I've listed them up here, like College Scorecard, College Board, College Data, College Navigator. These are all sites that give just tons of information about graduation rates, acceptance rates, boys to girls, popular majors, all kinds of data. Financial aid data, cost to apply, things like that. It's a lot of information. So you can start to dig into the universities that your student is curious about. Okay, because they are very good at their job with those exciting college visits, aren't they? And then this is just a real simple view of the timeline. So starting as early as possible, I would say as early as freshman year, maybe even I heard somebody was talking about middle school, is to start looking at the cost of college, you know, projecting out that 5 or 6% cost per year. And how far out is your student going to be starting? Have that money conversation. Are we saving money? Are you working, student, and are you saving a little bit of money that we can put away? Are mom and dad saving any money? Are mom and dad saving nothing? So that we know that by the time you get to college, there's nothing saved for you. A student needs to know those things. And then in the fall of, let's see, admission and scholarship. So in the fall of your senior year, you're going to start to apply for college, and you're going to want to do the FAFSA. And the FAFSA opens on October 1st. And for example, the FAFSA closed for UW on, I believe, January 15th. The FAFSA. Their college application deadline was November 15th. So You have to really tune into each college's unique deadlines. WSU has a January 31 FAFSA deadline and application deadline, and they also have a scholarship deadline that falls on that date. Okay, so applying for school, applying for financial aid. In the spring, that's when typically when you get the award letters that show what kind of financial aid you might be getting. Sometimes it's sooner. We've kind of gotten some stuff back from WSU where my son has applied. Okay, and then after you get that financial aid letter, you need to start to make some decisions on picking the school and figuring out what the aid looks like, and then what is the gap, how are we going to pay. Okay, so evaluating the shortfall. It's a very busy last year. So real quick on the different kinds of financial aid. We have merit and we have need. And so merit is just like it sounds. If you have a top student, they're likely to get some kind of top student aid, depending on the college, however. So for example, if you have a student who wants to go to Harvard, guess what? Harvard doesn't give out any merit aid because all their students are top students. They don't need to attract top students. They already get them, right? They do, however, pay out need aid. So if you're a family that's on the less affluent side and the cost to attend Harvard is higher than your EFC, they will pay 100% of that. As long as you get in, they will take care of you, is basically how it works. Okay, so need-based and merit-based aid. So need-based aid can be in the form of gift, but the self-help here really means loans and work study. So work study, you don't have to pay back, but it's working. You've got to work for that money. And then the loans, of course, is student loans that you have to pay back. So one of the things you need to do here is to figure out what kind of family are you? Where do you fit in with your student? Are you a high merit student with a low need, which is that first quadrant? Are you a low merit student with low need, or high merit student with high need, or low merit with high need? Because each of these quadrants would give you different strategies to help your family have the best outcome. Okay, and some of those strategies, like we talked about earlier, would be like in this first one, test prep. So I'll show you, hopefully we'll get into it here, but there are some colleges that as long as you have that GPA and that SAT score, they give you an automatic scholarship. And so if you're just like 1 point away from that automatic level, that's an argument to do test prep, to raise that up so that you meet that school's levels required for the merit aid. School selection is always a big thing. That probably plays the biggest role in the successful outcome on the financial side of things for your student. Understanding, are they a FAFSA school? Are they a CSS profile school? Do they do like Harvard and not give out merit aid, but they do give out need aid? What kind of a college are they? So those are the reasons you have to do some research. Okay. So real quick here too, this is how the need is calculated. We look at the total cost to attend. We subtract out your family's EFC, and there's all kinds of calculators online to help you figure out your EFC. And then that difference is your need. So if the cost to attend is $50,000, here's an example here. Cost to attend is $50,000, the family's EFC is 20, you have 30,000 in need. But if the cost to attend is 20 and your EFC is 20, you have no need. So you would get no need aid. You might get merit aid, but not any need aid. Okay? And there's some websites. You can also, and each school has their own net price calculators. Some are really generic and some are very in-depth. Have any of you visited those? Yeah, it can take some time, but they're worth doing. FAFSA, October 1, it opens. It's free. Don't pay for it. Be sure to do it. A lot of people question, why should I do it? We're not going to get any aid. My advice is to do it because circumstances change. We can't predict the future. I would just do it. It's not that big a deal. And the way aid works is we talk about the prior year. So my son will go to college this fall, since we're in 2019 now. He'll go in fall of 2019. We use the tax return from 2017 because that's the prior year to the year he's attending college. And so we call that the base year. And the reason that's important is if there's ever a year to be poor, it's that year. You know, and I don't mean poor, but I mean if there's ever a year to adjust or kind of tweak your income, if you have the ability to tweak your income, like if you're a business owner or if you were going to have a baby anyway and take time off from work, you know, those are some things to kind of keep in mind that can help your chances for financial aid. And here's how the EFC is calculated. You don't really need to know this because there are so many calculators, so you're not going to actually do your own calculations. But what's important is to know that if you have money in the parent's name, it's a parent asset, and that parent asset is calculated onto the FAFSA at 5.64%, which is low. That's the lowest of all these numbers. So ideally, we want things in the parent's name as a parent asset versus the student, because if you have a student asset, that's going to be multiplied by 20%. So that's going to have a larger impact on the EFC. Parent income is also the really big driver. It's you know, usually somewhere close to half. So if you make $100,000, you know, your EFC just might be close to 50, just on that alone. And that's a big driver of the EFC in general. And same for student, it is half. So if on your kids' taxes in that prior year, they were above the 6350 because they give you this as a freebie. So it's anything above that will be assessed at the 50%. So, you know, you don't want to limit a student's earning ability, but if they're only making like another $50 over the $63.50, it's probably not worth it as far as FAFSA goes. So, but you can't make all your decisions in a FAFSA bubble either, really. Okay. And then what's accessible on the FAFSA? These are all things that are counted on the FAFSA, and these are not. And so typically these are all retirement type things. Retirement IRA accounts, the Roth IRA, workplace 401ks, and so on, pensions, annuities, cash value in life insurance, that's kind of an interesting one. Home equity, so the home I live in, they don't count that on the FAFSA. If I have a rental house, then they count the equity, so the value minus the debt on that, that's counted on the FAFSA. Okay, and small businesses is not really counted on the FAFSA unless you have over 100 employees. Okay, so this is a common mistake when doing the FAFSA. People will put down their retirement accounts, and that's going to hurt you because it's wrong. Okay, yep. So I'm not going to run through an example. Yep, just some more detail there. The CSS profile. We only have about 6 schools in the Northwest: Lewis and Clark, Oregon State, Reed, Whitman, and Whitworth, New St. Andrews. Those are CSS profile schools. They just go above and beyond the FAFSA in determining the family's ability to pay. And the main differences are on that home equity, because FAFSA does not factor in home equity. The CSS does, and the consensus does too. And that's, I think, an even smaller group of colleges that I can't remember who they are off the top of my head, but I don't know that there's hardly any around here. What else is different? The small business is different. So on the FAFSA, unless you have 100 or more employees, it's not factored in. On the CSS, it is. Okay, so just some subtle differences you can see. It depends on the school that you apply to. And there's plenty of CSS schools. There's just not a lot in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, so scholarships. We always like to tell our kids, go apply for scholarships, right? Help pay for school. Well, the big money appears to be really at the institutions themselves. So they have endowments, they have money saved to give to students. This is representing the private scholarships that are out there. And I think I read something that, that college costs $500 billion and that the private scholarships represents about $20 billion. So it is small compared to the need, but the real money is still at the institutions themselves, which means that your students should be constantly looking at their campus, in their program, you know, on their school scholarship site and applying all through college, not just before college, all through college. And I even talked to UW and I asked them, so you don't give out merit aid? And they're like, no, we don't give out merit aid. But once you get into UW and you go to a department, they have scholarships in there that might be considered merit aid. So they do give out some money, it's just you don't know about it, and they're not going to use it to entice you as a freshman because they don't need to. They got too many applying as it is. So we talked a little bit about that grid or automatic. That's if you have the right GPA and the right test score, that you can get an automatic scholarship or competitive scholarships. You just got to find them and apply, even at the institutions. Okay, there's an example. I'm going to go kind of quick because we're running out of time. Just examples again, you know, it'd be great to get into Harvard because if my family, I think they have some limits that if your family makes under $75,000, it's free. You don't even have to pay to go to Harvard. If it's up to 120, they pay most of it, but you got to get in, you know, and that's why it's so competitive for those schools. But other schools do use merit aid to entice students to come, but your students still got to be a top student, and that means somewhere in the 10 to 25% of the college kids at that university. Okay, just more examples. This is from College Board site. So if you're looking for information on how to pay or how to apply some of the popular majors, that would be a really great place. And then what kind of aid are they giving? Are they giving the need-based aid or are they giving the merit-based aid? And here you can see they're not giving any merit-based aid. That's Yale. So a quick example that it's the net cost that matters, because we get that big college number in our mind. We think college costs $50,000. That's the sticker price, but it pays to apply, and it does pay to understand the scholarship and the financial aid process at those universities, because even once you've done that, there is the chance that they may have some tricks up their sleeves that will make it end up being less than you would expect. It's just, it's work. It's work to apply. It's work to look up the scholarships. It takes time and work and energy. Okay, so just bringing it all together again, college, retirement, and investments. Planning for one is not just in a bubble. You know, that's kind of the position I'm coming from. We ultimately want a positive outcome for not only the student going to college, but for the parents as well. We want to see, you know, the student graduating on time with that diploma, not having too much debt, and so on. And these are just some of the things that we talked about today that are strategies to help you kind of minimize the cost of college or make a better decision as to what college you might consider. We didn't get into a lot of if you have businesses or own a small business, there are some more complicated tax strategies that can be taken advantage of, and those are also very good possibilities that working with an accountant, you can apply those to your business as well. Anybody have a business, small business? Okay, something to keep in mind. So, you know, we just want to avoid our babies ending up in such a sad situation like Scott, because I'm certain Scott didn't want to be in the position he was in decades after he graduated from college. So we want to help our kids avoid that. All right, so no matter where, you know, life takes your kid or you know, those are the kinds of things that we're seeking to help, you know, make smart choices, smart college buying choices, smart retirement choices. We don't want to jeopardize mom and dad or the student who's going to college. So I do have a standalone little service if that is something that any of you would be interested in. And if any of you were to email me tonight or tomorrow to say, yeah, I think I'd like to go ahead and take advantage of that, we'll go over all the stuff with the software that's specific to you. And we don't have to work on it right away, but if you can just let me know that you'd like to get started, and we can do that as well. So, and it's $2.99, $29 off if you let me know in the next couple days. I'd appreciate that. All right. And I always have a standing 30-minute free phone call if anybody ever wants to just go to my website, and I've got several places where you can schedule a complimentary call, and you can pick a day and a time to work on that. Okay. So thank you very much. Any questions? Any other questions? Are there any questions down